Okay, so to continue on from the previous lesson, go ahead and click on this bone, press the shift key down, this one, and then this one over here. So you've already seen that when we do Alt F, it's going to basically flip the bones. So right now, this bone is the child of this bone over here, and this bone is the child of this bone. And of course, as you know, this bone is the parent of this bone, and this bone is the parent of this bone. Okay, so now if we do Alt F to flip the relationships, you can see that it's going to sever the connection over here and sever the connection over here. But notice that the relationships have been switched. Where this bone was before the parent of this bone is now the child of this bone. So you can flip relationships like this with Alt F. Now if we want to take this bone, you can see that it's lost its parent, and make it the child of this bone, we would first click on the child, press the shift key down and click on this one, and now when we do Control P, we would have to do keep offset. We cannot do connected here, right? The reason for this is if we did connected, it would take the head of this bone and move it to the child. Same thing over here. If we click on this bone, which is going to be the child first, press the shift key down, click on this one, which is going to be the parent, do Control P. Here you would have to click on keep offset. If we didn't, it would take the head of this bone and move it to where the child is. Okay, so now we're going to move forward to a new subject. So if you click on the tail of this bone and press the G key, you can see that the x-axis mirror feature allows you to move the bone on the other side when you have the .L and the .R suffix. Okay, right click to cancel this. And now when you press the E key to extrude a bone out, you can see that it allows you to also extrude the bone out on the other side. Now notice that when you extrude a bone out, here Blender will simply give that bone the same name from where it was extruded out, meaning its parent, and then it adds a .001. So meaning that if we click on the tail of this bone now and press the E key to extrude out, you'll see that now the number is simply just incrementing. I'm going to do Control middle mouse button so you can see this over here. Okay, so now go ahead and click on this bone X and delete this, and now click on this bone. Notice that over here after the .L suffix, the only thing you are allowed to do is add a number like this. So if you click over here and change this to A and press the enter key, then click on this one and change this to A and press the enter key, you'll notice that the x-axis mirror feature is no longer valid. Okay, now go ahead, click on this bone X and delete this, click on this bone X and delete this. Now click over here, E to extrude. Now click over here and I want you to move this L before the fix. So over here we're just going to type in L dot and remove the L from here and press the enter key. Okay, and now hover your mouse over here, do Control C, click on this bone, click inside, do Control V, and now change the L to R and press enter. Now if you click on the tail of this bone and press the G key, you'll see that it does not work. So it is a requirement that when you are using the .L and .R suffix to work with the x-axis mirror feature, the .L and the .R must be end of the name of your bone. Okay, and it can have numbers. Now the only reason Blender is adding the numbers, if we delete this bone over here, E to extrude, the only reason Blender is adding these numbers is because bones can only have unique names. So when you're using the x-axis mirror feature to develop your rig where you want to see the other side extrude, here Blender has no choice but to use this concept of these numbers after the suffix so you can continue on at adding more and more bones. Okay, so I want you to be aware of this concept over here. So let's go ahead and actually save this file. Okay, so now we're going to move on to another subject over here. Do shift and middle mouse button to pan up. Now when you're working with bones that are in the center like this, and you click on the tail of this bone over here, which is the dev spine, when you press the E key to extrude, it's only going to give you one bone over here. Okay, and you already saw that when you have a bone which already has the .L and a .R suffix on the other side, it's of course going to give you a mirrored image on the extrusion. But because this bone is in the center, and also this dev.spine does not have a .L and a .R counterpart, it's always going to give you one single bone. Shift middle mouse button to pan down over here. See where the origin point is? It's in the center of the 3D grid. So if we move back up over here and click on the dev spine, in the transforms, you can see that the location of the head is at 0, 0, 0, right? So Blender doesn't know, first of all, that which is the left or the right. And the second thing is, because we haven't told Blender that this bone is marked as a .L or a .R, it's not going to bother to give us a bone with the .L and the .R suffix. Okay, so we're going to X and delete this. But if you want Blender to force the creation of bones like this, when a bone is directly in the center of your armature's origin point, where the X axis is on the 0 for the head, here we can click on the tail and press Shift E to extrude, and this will now give you a bone on the left or the right. Okay, so if we turn off the X-axis mirror feature, click on this bone, press the E key to extrude, click on this, and over here we're just going to type in A and enter. Right now there is no .L and .R suffix concept. Now turn on X-axis mirror feature. So if you click on the tail of this bone and press Shift E over here, you'll see that it's still going to give you a .L and .R. Even though the rules over here are that it needs to be on the left or the right side of the origin point. So you can actually force it to come out like this. Okay, so if we click on this bone, you can see that it did in fact add the .R, and over here it did in fact add the .L. So you can actually create bones that are mirrored in this way. But notice the behavior over here. Look at the tail's distance from where the model is. Look at the tail's distance from where the model is. This is why it's giving you this odd behavior where you're getting a bone that is larger, because this bone is simply stretching to the same location as the other side. Okay, so this is why, of course, you're not going to use it in this way. I'm just going to X and delete that. I just want to show you that if you want to extrude from its center point, you can do Shift E. Now notice that over here, when we have the X-axis mirror feature on, if you click on the armature menu, here you can see that it says extrude forked. That's what we use, Shift E. But when you turn this off and go back, you'll see that it removes the menu item. Okay, so in order to use the Shift E, you have to have X-axis mirror feature on. Okay, so now you should have noticed that when we extruded the bone out like this from the center, using the Shift E, here Blender used its own naming convention. It used an underscore and a capital L. And now when we named our bones, we decided on a naming convention to keep everything lowercase. Okay, this is because we're going to be dealing with over 300 bones. So we need to keep everything simple. We're not using any capital letters. We're not using any dashes, underscores. Everything is being kept lowercase, so it's straightforward. We already have to click inside here and try to delete letters, right, when we were messing around over here. So you saw that how that can become frustrating when you're dealing with so many bounds. So over here, when Blender does that, you would have to go in here and actually make sure that this one is .l enter. Then you have to click over here and make sure that this one is .r and enter. Now when you click on the tail of the bone, do E to extrude, it's going to make sure that it keeps to that same naming convention. Okay, so this brings us to another subject over here. When you click on this bone, press the shift key down, this. When you have a mirrored image on the other side, you already saw that when we do Control M, we can use it to mirror the bone on the other side, right? But if you do Shift Control M, it can actually flip the selection on the other side. This only works when the .L and the .R bones exist on both sides, okay? So let's go ahead and now save this file. Okay, so what we can do now is actually move on to another subject. So here we're going to do Shift C to place the 3D cursor in the center of the grid. Basically, this is the same point where the origin is for the armature. Now do Shift A, and this is going to add a bone where the 3D cursor is, right? It's going to place the head of the bone where the 3D cursor is, and it's going to select the tail for you. Go ahead and click on the blue arrow and bring the tail down a bit over here. Go ahead and zoom in, Shift middle mouse button. So here you can see that when we click on this bone, if you look at the location for the head, it's at 0 on basically all three axes. Now, having the bone selected, if we do W, Blender gives you the ability to automatically add the .L and the .R. Here you can see that you also have options for front, back, and top, bottom. Now these two are simply just naming conventions. They don't do anything special in Blender. However, you might find some add-ons that help you to use these naming conventions in some way if you're working on a quadruped. It's only the .L and the .R that have a special meaning in Blender, and you can see right now it's using the X-axis mirror feature. Now, if we switch to object mode over here and click on our figure and actually click on the data tab, the .L and .R, as you will see later, will be used in the vertex groups. It's also used by shape keys because these are all related to this concept of rigging. We're going to go ahead and click on this bone and switch back to the edit mode in the armature. So if we click on W and then tell Blender to auto name this bone, you'll see that when we click it, nothing is going to happen over here. Okay, the reason for this is because where the head is placed at the 0 location, meaning that Blender is going to look at the X-axis to where the origin is, and it's going to figure out if the bone is on the left or the right side of this origin point. So if we click on this red arrow and move it to the left of the origin point, meaning that it's looking at the X-axis and drawing an imaginary perpendicular line over here, when we do W and fire this off, you'll see that it adds an R. It's all based on the origin point and where the head is. If we move it to this side over here and do W and fire this off, it's going to change it to an L. If you press W and fire this off, it's just going to repeat the same process, okay? So if you go over here where we had extruded, let's say this bone, you can see that we already are using the .L and 001. So if we do W and fire this off, it's going to add a .L and make this L invalid, because you've already seen that the suffix of .L needs to be at the end, and because bones can only have unique names, if you click on the tail of this bone and press the E key, it's simply just going to do the same thing, add a 0 at the 001 at the end after the .L. Go ahead and go back over here. Now, if we click on this bone and move it to the top where the head is above this, what it's going to do now is basically take a look at this blue line, which is the z-axis over here, and going to draw a perpendicular line on the x-axis. So anything above over here will now be named top. So if we do W and fire this off, you'll see that it's going to say top. If we bring the head below over here, do W, fire this off, it's going to say bot, meaning bottom. Right, so you can see that it doesn't care where the tail is, it cares where the head is. Now let's go to the right view over here and move this bone to the front. So now if you look at the y-axis over here, it's going to draw an imaginary perpendicular line over here. So anything on this side will be named front. So if we do W and fire this off, it will say FR. And if we take this bone over here on this side, do W and fire this off, it'll just say BK. Right, so if you're working on a quadruped, you can use this as a naming convention. So here we can move this to the front, do W and front back, and go to the front view. Now because this bone is also on the left side over here, right, what you can do is actually now you have to kind of do this manually. Right now this has FR. Right, so if we do W and then do okay, we want to use the x-axis mirror feature and we fire this off, it's just going to change that to an L. So if we click on W and do front back, then we can click in here and do .L and enter. Now if you shift D this and duplicate this bone and put it here on this side, and then click on this bone, hover your mouse, Control C, click over here, click inside, Control V, and now change this to R, press enter key. If you click this, you'll get the x-axis mirror feature to work with that naming convention, meaning that this naming convention, as I said, is not going to do anything special for you in Blender, right? It's only going, it might be used by add-ons. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and now save this file. Okay, so now I'm just going to show you, go under File and then go ahead and open the Rigging Lesson 01f.blend. Now go ahead under File, do Save As, and now save it again as Bone Concepts. Here I'm going to show you this special function that can automatically mirror the bones. Go ahead and zoom in, shift middle mouse button over here, right? So the armature is selected and you're back in edit mode over here. Go ahead and turn this off. Click on the tail of this bone, press the G key, move it over here. Click on this one, press the G key, move it over here. So if you click on this bone, press the Shift key down this one, and now do W, you can use this function over here to automatically correct the other bones on the opposite side, as long as they exist, right? So let's fire this off. So you can see it is doing a perfect mirror of these bones. Press the 1 key to go back to the front view. Now, if we have the x-axis mirror feature off, click on this bone and click on this bone, X and delete this. Now if we click on these two bones, do W and fire this off, it's going to actually create the bones for you and name them and do a perfect mirror. So we can use this function to mirror to the left or the right. So if you click on these two bones, X and delete, now click on these two, do W and fire this off, you can see that it does the mirror on both sides. So now to press the 1 key over here and go ahead and actually let me do tab. Go ahead and do Shift G and select by suffix over here, making sure that x-axis mirror is off, X and delete these bones. Now click over here, do Shift G, select by suffix. Now when you do W and fire this off, it's going to mirror everything for you. So you can use this function to mirror your bones. Notice that when you do W, it doesn't say that you can do that, but it does say that it will enforce symmetry and make copies of the selected or use existing. So right now this function is kind of undocumented in Blender, but we can definitely use it to mirror the bones. So let's go ahead and now just reload the rigging lesson 01. So I will see you in the next lesson. Thank you.